Radio Free Santa Clarita presents The Talk of Santa Clarita, a podcast about issues involving Santa Clarita and the surrounding valley. Episode 129, Republican Candidate for the 25th Congressional District, Mike Garcia. And now, let's see what the Talk of Santa Clarita is.
And remember, this is for posterity, so be honest.
Mike Garcia, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Stephen. Appreciate it.
It's been a while trying to get you on the show.
Yeah, I apologize about that. It's been a busy few months, as you can imagine.
Have you, just fundraising mostly, right? I mean, getting out there? Or?
Yeah, actually, a lot of fundraising, a lot of phone calls, but actually a lot of meetings, a lot of one-on-one meetings with folks and with the clubs, and making sure that I'm touching all the big Republican clubs throughout the district.
Yeah.
And sitting down with as many of the key stakeholders and constituents in the district as I can. So it's been busy. Lots to do when you're first starting out.
Is this your first time to run for something?
Yeah, never been in politics. I think, let's see, the last time I was in a position, I was the student body president back in 6th grade at a school that no longer exists called Arroyo Seco Elementary School in Saugus. So
I'm assuming the fundraising for that is very simple.
It was pretty straightforward, yeah.
Was it? Okay. Okay, so have you been enjoying the campaign? Is it as far as doing what you're doing? Or
yeah, absolutely.
I've met politicians that say, well, I enjoy the work, but I don't enjoy the actual fundraising.
Yeah, the fundraising is, anyone that enjoys the fundraising is a different creature. There's nothing natural for someone like myself I've always prided myself on earning things, working hard to get what I want. Sort of pick up a phone call and ask someone for money is an unnatural act, right? So
yeah.
But it does tie out to the why and whether I'm enjoying it. There's days that are tougher than others. There's days that are more enjoyable. But in the end, it's for the right reasons.
Right.
And that's what I think when you're talking to folks. The way I've caged my brain to be okay with the ask of money is, I'm not asking this for myself, right? I'm asking for the good of my district, the good of my nation, and we need to all get together and pool this money so that we can be competitive in the next election.
Yeah.
Once you kind of get over that sort of that mental block there and the inability to really want to ask for help, it becomes easier. It's never natural, but I'm surprised by how many folks actually understand the why and the rationale. And there's a lot of passionate people out there, and we're seeing a lot of that with our campaign already. We've got somewhere between 50 to 60 volunteers already signed up, which is pretty unprecedented nice, for first quarter results. So it's been very fulfilling. It's been very challenging. It's a nonstop thing. If anyone thinks it's a 20-hour-a-week kind of job, then
it's full time.
It's
right?
full time plus.
How do you handle that with your family and work and stuff like that, and doing anything?
Yeah, great question. So for my family, first of all, my wife Rebecca is my rock. She owns her own small business as well.
She's an interior designer.
She's an interior designer out here in the valley in Santa Clarita. So she's got a full plate as well, but both sets of our parents, my mom and stepdad, and then my dad live out here, and her parents are, we're all within a couple of miles of each other. So we have a nice foundation to help with the kids. I had a good discussion with my 12-year-old before running, and he's starting to get to that age where he can understand the value of this and the importance of this to the country. Right. So that that resonated with him, and we put a lot of thought into it before committing. So that's the biggest care about for me is to make sure that my family unit is protected through this as much as we can. They're going to be subjected to things, and they're going to see Dad be subjected to things that is going to be uncomfortable.
Isn't it fun though? Checking on Facebook and seeing what they're saying about you.
A lot of passionate people on Facebook.
On both sides.
On both sides. It's one of those things, you try to compartmentalize it. You try to protect the kids from it. But there's moments, you know, like the 4th of July parade, and I think we saw you there as well, you know.
I was chasing you down.
Yeah. And I had no idea who you were, so I'm like, oh, who's this crazy guy running up the side here?
You should have seen Angela Underwood-Jacobs' reaction when I handed her a card and said, "Call me."
Oh, really? Yeah. So, but you know, there's moments like that where you just say, you know, how blessed are we, you know, to be able to be a part of this, and the amount of support and you know, for them to see that process, and this whole process is going to be very educational for them. As far as my job, you know, I am full-time at a large aerospace company.
Right.
I have been able to take a lot of vacation time, and I continue to do so. My replacement, I hired my replacement about a month ago, so I'm actively doing turnover here. So
you quit your job?
I'm quitting my job. I'm in the process of leaving right now, signing out, and
so this is a serious thing. You plan on being the next congressperson?
That's absolutely right. Yeah, I'm going to be flying without a net here, you know, for about a year with no income. So we've prepared ourselves for this, you know, over the last 9 months, mentally, financially. I've been blessed to be in a position where I can do that, and it helps. But it's still a very stressful thing. But it's one of those things that, you know, for me, everything that is friction is a source of motivation as well, right? So I'm looking at this going, I'm not doing this to lose. I'm not doing this to come in second place. And this is a long-term commitment, and it doesn't end when I get elected. It ends when I'm done serving my nation. You know, that can be an extended period of time as long as the constituents of the district see that I'm doing my job and I'm representing them well and I'm doing it.
You know the last person I spoke to that had that attitude about running for office that I met?
No.
Katie Hill.
Katie Hill.
Said literally almost the same kind of stuff.
That may be where the lines are. That may be the end of the commonality.
We're going to get into that
sure.
at some point. But I do want to ask, let's just talk about who Mike Garcia is.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, you're married, right? You
said married.
Your wife's,
my wife's a millennial. You know, she's 32 years old.
How old are you? Do you want to say?
I'm 43 years old.
Okay.
So, but you know, Stephen, it's not the age, it's the mileage. so some days I feel older than 43. My body, you know, with some of the things I've done in the past has paid the toll. So you know, it's an active recovery process for me.
I like to think I'm 25 until I try and get out of the chair.
Exactly right.
You know?
Yeah. So I'm high mileage. I've seen a lot, but I've learned a lot as well. So 43 years old. We have a 12-year-old and a 2-year-old. The 2-year-old's about to be 3 here in a week or so.
And their names are?
Preston is the 12-year-old.
Great name.
Oh yeah.
My middle name.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
There you go. And then Jet is the other one, which that was a source of debate between my wife and my wife.
Did you actually?
My wife loved the name Jet, and I was like, no, you know, I don't want to be the
fighter pilot.
The fighter pilot that made his kid be named, you know, like the Great Santini or something.
Yeah.
And then after a few months, it wore on me, and
it's a good name. I like it.
It's a strong name. It's a good name.
But it wasn't because you were a fighter pilot.
No, absolutely not. The only reason I was not wanting to do that was because of that inference. And it's just like, oh no, this is going to be for it. But in the end, that name suits him perfectly. When you meet him, he is, you know, his middle name is James after his grandfather on my wife's side, and he is a Jet James, and he's a little fireball.
Great name.
So,
yeah.
So that's our family. Yep.
And let's see, are you a religious man? Are you?
I am. I'm a Christian. We go to a real life church. I actually just spent a couple weekends ago giving a talk about the Pledge of Allegiance at the Freedom Baptist Church up there. I grew up in mixed. My mother's side is Catholic. My father was actually at some point, LDS as well, and I grew up with all of my friends being LDS. So I grew up in the church environment. I'm a very spiritual person. I don't go. You don't see the things I've seen and survive some of the things I've seen without being spiritual and believing in God. So that's a big foundation pillar for everything that I believe in.
Let's see, 43. So you fought in the Iraq War, but which one?
The second one.
The second one. Okay.
No, much too young for the first. I was on the USS Nimitz in 2003. I was based out of Lemoore, California, which is just a few hours north of here. And we cruised west to be a part of the first. We were there for I think the first six and a half months of the Operation Iraqi Freedom.
What's that like being in combat? Were you scared at all, or?
It's a surreal feeling, and I know it sounds cliche to say it's surreal, but it truly is surreal. At that point, I had been in training. I graduated from Annapolis in '98, and then went to flight school at the very beginning of 2000. So by the time I was in war, I'd been training for 3 years, but I was still relatively new, right? And I had just learned how to fly the Super Hornet, maybe the F-18, maybe a year and a half before that. So you're a younger, mid-20s pilot, not a lot of experience, but the training that the Navy gives you leading up to that is so intense that when you get into an environment that we saw in Iraq, it was less of a threat than some of the training environments that we were seeing. So where are you scared? You're always scared. You always treat everything with respect. When you're getting shot off the front of an aircraft carrier at night.
That's insane to me. I just can't imagine.
You're never at ease, right? It's not like flying a Cessna around the LA basin, right? You're just trolling around. It's never. There's moments where you get to relax and enjoy the flying and the aspects that you see. But we would take off, and maybe we spend a couple minutes just because it's kind of interesting. You take off, and on a typical mission, it would be about 2 hours to get to Baghdad or to Crete, which is we were operating in the northern part of Iraq, and you'd get there and you'd be lower on gas than you would need to fulfill your mission. So you'd tank, and so you do air refueling, which in and of itself is a high risk.
Yeah, it's fascinating watching that happen.
It's a miracle of physics, and you'd take on a few thousand pounds of gas, and then you'd go over your target area. And what we were doing is really protecting the 18-year-old kid, with an M16 on the ground. And when they needed our help, they'd call us. Sometimes it was pre-planned. Sometimes it was they'd call us down and we'd help them.
How long were you in the war?
So it was about 6.5 months. We were there from April to, I think we left in October, the Persian Gulf in October timeframe. I'd have to look at my logbook for exactly.
That was probably the most controversial war that's ever happened. To my knowledge, at least, that's the first time I think we were doing the first strike, the invasion itself. Did you ever question the politics involved with it?
I mean, as a human being, you always question internally. You always thought about, is this a just war? Is this a right war? Right? And as a naval officer, that is an expected thing, right? So as a lieutenant in the Navy, if you didn't have those thoughts, or if you didn't internally question, why are we here, what are we doing? Because you need to be able to convey that to your troops, right? At the time, I had 40, 50 folks working for me in the avionics and armaments division. So these are the kids that fixed the planes and loaded the bombs and loaded the weapons. So they looked to the officers and the leadership to explain to them, hey, why are we here, Lieutenant, right? What am I doing here? Is this are we going to, when we get home, are we going to be treated with respect or embraced as veterans or not? And that's the kind of conversation you needed to be prepared for. I myself, and the key is you internalize those conversations. But as an officer in the Navy, you do your job, right? My job at the time was to fly F-18s and deliver my mission.
I'm asking you, do I
think it was a just war? I do. I think given the state of affairs there, given the intelligence that the administration had at the time, this, for folks who aren't aware, this was the weapons of mass destruction debate, right? And are there chemicals there? Are there nukes there? Biochemical warfare, and it was a president acting on the information that he had, right? And he's a human being, and in the end, Saddam Hussein was a terrible person, right? And so.
So knowing what you know now, though, would you support the war? Would you say going into Iraq is a good idea? Really?
I think so, yeah. I think the timing, the timing's always debatable. The method of how you go in is always debatable. And it's easy to be a Monday morning quarterback and throw stones and critique the way a war is won, right? You can look back at Gettysburg and go, wow, General Lee, you really screwed that one up, right? And go, okay, and he did every day, and he did, right? He screwed it up, and it's easy to do that, right? And we all do that, right? So But look, first of all, the thing that I have a lot of respect for, and I'm really cautious about, is, and this is relevant today, as well, is when someone asks you, "Hey, how do you feel about this?" If you don't have access to the full picture, and if you can't see all of the data that went into that decision, it's interesting what you think, and it's interesting what you feel, and even now, I don't have all of the data, obviously, that went into the president's decision matrix back in 2003. But there's a lot of briefs at a lot of different levels, and that paints the full picture, and that's why they're there. They're there to make those decisions, and sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong, and it's a difficult call.
I was told by a Facebook person that wanted to know when I was going to interview you that I should ask you to take me into a plane and fly.
And fly?
No, not fly, but ride.
So we can do that. That would be our last day as free men. We'd be in jail.
No, I think I probably would just throw up. Do you have barf bags in those things?
We make them. Yeah, we make guests carry these big bags, and they're used. Trust me, they're used.
Yeah, I believe you.
And depending on who it is that's in there, sometimes it may be intentional.
Just out of curiosity, let me pull a Colbert on you. And George W. Bush, great president or the greatest president?
I think he was a good president. The greatest. I mean, that's a bold statement, right? Abraham Lincoln, in my opinion, greatest president ever. You have a guy that.
Strangely enough, though, Lincoln, even though he was a Republican, was a liberal.
Liberal in some aspects, yeah. And I say that in the sense that he served his country for the right reasons.
Yeah.
He made great sacrifices. And again, it's tough in this day to see just reading. So this is all me based on reading books and seeing documentaries. But he gave a lot to this country, and he led this nation through the toughest times this country has ever seen.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that could have gone really poorly had he not done what he did as well as he did. So Lincoln, greatest president. I did get to meet Bush Sr. At one point. I wrote a paper in college about at the Naval Academy about President Bush. It was called President Bush and His Lovely Little War, right? So it was a paper about a president's rights and abilities to engage in warfare, either with Congress or without Congress, and it was back and forth. All that aside, he was coming to visit our campus one day, and I had just gotten the paper back that day, and I think I got an A- on it, luckily. But so I had this paper about him, and he comes and visits our campus, and I come around a corner, and I literally physically bump into President Bush.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And this is while Clinton is in office at this point, so he wasn't the sitting president. So all of his guards are there, and I just happened to have this paper. I go, Mr. President, would you mind signing this? And he looks at it, and it was a cold day, so his hands are shaking, and he goes, you make me look like an a-hole, son? And I go, no, sir. And he signs it. So I still have this paper from Bush 1 that is signed by him. But greatest, I wouldn't say greatest. Both Bushes were good presidents. They were good leaders.
I actually like the first George Bush. I don't agree with everything he did, but I do think foreign policy-wise, he was quite brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely.
And very underrated as a president, in a lot of ways. In the shadow of Reagan, and then Clinton coming in, and who just embraced domestic policy so well. Right or wrong, it just that was his first agenda. So I think he's kind of, but you got to meet him. That's pretty cool.
So what was the question the Facebook guy asked? Just if you could go flying? If you go flying? Oh, okay. All right.
Just to get off on a tangent there. Son of immigrants?
My father and my grandfather. So my grandfather immigrated here in 1959. My dad was 9 years old at the time. He was the oldest of 5 children. And they moved to Fillmore initially, and then moved down to the San Fernando Valley. Obviously did it legally. That's a big deal. But my grandfather was an entrepreneur. He was a business owner down in Mexico.
Right.
Clean slate, came up here, restarted, did it for all the right reasons to build a better life for his young family. And started his own construction company, a company called Sonora Construction, which ended up being one of the bigger construction companies in the 80s and early 90s down in San Fernando Valley. And so I got to go, work with him, work with my dad and him, laying curb and gutters and working concrete, and got to see the value of the hard work and see my grandfather lead a company that was flourishing at the time and was getting rewarded for it. So that was kind of the
You've seen the American dream basically happen.
Yeah, basically it, and that truly laid the seeds for me mentally in terms of how I viewed things like entitlements and hard work and how do you get things in life and my dad as a young kid, he'd drive me around Bel Air when I was still living up here in Santa Clarita. We'd go down and we'd go look at the big houses. And we never got out of the car. We'd just drive around, and he'd go, "What do you think he does for a living? What do you think she does for a living?" Right? And we'd have the conversations about how did they get there and what led to that, right? And then that included, hey, he was a trust fund baby. He didn't do anything in his life, just was in the right place, had the right parents, and now he's rich, right? So, but that was the foundation of what I saw as from a work ethic and how do you move up in life. It's through hard work, and there's no doubt. When I was 12 years old, I would, off of Copper Hill, we lived in Saugus when Seco Canyon Road had just ended, right there where La Cocina didn't go any further besides San Francisco. As a 12-year-old, I got an old golf cart, and I put a large ice chest on it. And while they were doing the construction to build all those houses off of the Miramontes and the stuff off of Copper Hill, I'd go sell ice cold sodas, to the construction workers every summer and buy them for $0.25, sell them for 50 cents, and at the end of the month I made a couple $100.
Very smart.
And so
by the way, that water's going to cost you $1.
I appreciate it. Not $2. That's good. The Girl Scouts are selling them for $5. So that's where I learned the value of it, and it became something that was a closed feedback loop, right? Where I did it, I saw the results, and I was immediately able to recognize how to where all the levers were, right? If I went to Costco instead of another grocery store, I was able to lower the cost, right? So that at a young age, that was always something that was in my head.
So I mean, is that why you're a Republican? Just a belief in that you can accomplish anything with hard work? Period.
That's a big part of it. Yeah. There's some specific issues that I'm sure we'll get into here in a second that define me. I'm Mike Garcia, right? That's who I am, and my principles and my opinions on issues align with the Republican Party. So as a Republican, that's how we define our boundary layers. And but yeah, smaller government, hard work.
Should there be a social safety net? Do you believe in that?
I believe in Social Security for sure.
What about food stamps?
Food stamps at a low level, I think, is as a purist, I would say no. Everyone should have to figure out how to fend for themselves.
Medicare?
Medicare at some levels, yes, as well.
Medicaid?
Again, I get to look at the level of that. I'm not a big fan of that. Social Security is not one of those things, though, right? Social Security is absolutely something we need to protect. Those are investments that we as citizens have invested in. We've put that money in, and that's a contract with the government that needs to be maintained. I do understand that people get on hard times. Here's where I land on all of these, on all the programs. There should be safety nets.
Okay.
But I don't want the federal government to be the safety net, right? I want the churches, I want the local community, nonprofits, I want our neighbors to be the safety nets, because a dollar that's spent at the federal government level on food stamps, by the time it gets to the level where someone's actually using those stamps and getting merchandise as a result of that, the inefficiency lost through that whole process is staggering, right? So there's organizations like the local Veterans Collaborative group out here that I know that when we put money into that, that money it pivots right away into someone who needs that safety net, right? Healthcare becomes a bigger problem because of the cost and the magnitude of it, and that's a
it is 1/6 of the economy.
Right.
Like the Affordable Care Act or not, I always tell people it's like it was going to hit some bumps no matter what, because 1/6 of the economy. No matter what happens, there's going to be
That's right.
ramifications.
So I just look at that as at a macro level. How do you download the healthcare problem to the lowest levels possible, so that effectively every time you layer anything up, right, it becomes more and more inefficient.
Yeah.
And the federal government is a great example.
I understand what you're saying. However, nonprofits and churches and stuff like that have the right to refuse people, if they want it. In the Constitution, it does say the right to pursue happiness. If a person's not able to even eat or get medical aid when they need it when they're sick,
right,
how do they pursue happiness? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
If it's a right of the individual as part of the United States of America and the Constitution itself, shouldn't the government be providing some kind of safety net then?
I think the government needs to provide an equal playing field, and I think at lower levels, and I think this will probably be a circular argument, because, but at lower levels, we have the right to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The government provides us that right. To that end, the government provides a level playing field. What we're seeing today, though, and there's always going to be exceptions. There's always going to be people who are on hard times that are just the Swiss cheese all lined up exactly the wrong way for them, and and you can see right through 6 layers of cheese now that it's just a really bad situation for them. But our economy right now, anyone who's struggling to get a job should do a good self-assessment of what's going on and where they are, and there's literally jobs looking for people right now rather than people looking for jobs under this economy. So I like to filter those folks out that just don't want to work, right? There's always people that just don't want to work and they want the government handout. When you have that mentality and then you get into a car accident, that's unfortunate. But it's not the government's job, certainly not the federal government's job, to provide that safety net for you.
What about your job? In the sense of, you're an American citizen.
That's right.
You're running to be in Congress. You're a Christian. Do you think Jesus would turn away somebody if they were in a car wreck or had been living off the government or something?
Absolutely not.
So why are you saying that it's tough luck for them?
Well, I'm not saying that's tough luck for them. From the federal government's perspective, that is right. Jesus is not the federal government, right?
No, but
the reason we cherish and worship Jesus is because as an individual he took the time to help others, right? As an individual, he did things to make sure that, to the max extent possible, that he was helping those in need and those who needed the safety net. I'm saying, as good Christians in our community, we should continue that, and that's on us as individuals. The federal government is terrible at that. If anyone is in dire straits and they're relying on the federal government, how many examples of incompetence and inefficiencies have we seen from this government? The last entity that you should want help from is your federal government, right?
Well, I know, but I guess one point is you mentioned that people that just want to live off the government, and now you're saying that that's probably the worst way to do it anyway.
Right.
When you look at SSI and some of the other programs that are out there, the amount of money that a person to get to live off the government is, poverty levels. It's not like they're driving nice new cars and and great housing and everything like that. So I question. And you're speaking to somebody who used to be a food stamp caseworker,
right?
Okay,
sure.
So I question the amount of people that are out there just living off the government because they can live off the government.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that's all of them by any stretch of the imagination. There are people that have gotten screwed in life. There are people who have worked hard, who, due to circumstances beyond their control.
Sure.
But I would submit that those people will find a way. They will get the help of their neighbors. They'll get the helps of their local churches and organizations around them, and if they're truly hardworking, they'll get back up on that ladder and start climbing again. But I think the biggest deal is your plan A should never be anchored to the federal government, right? If you're saying, hey, I'm going to live off of SSI or SSD, I think the disability piece, and or Social Security in general, if you're living that lifestyle and that's okay, then good on you. That's a great plan. But if you're going to complain and that, hey, I don't have the car that I wanted, right, or I'm not living the lifestyle that I'd like to enjoy, then start augmenting that. Start putting in a plan to do other things, and you got to be proactive about it. I keep going back to the hard work and the planning and the discipline is what matters. And discipline is probably the biggest thing that matters, right? I think that you can have dreams, you can have hopes, you can have a good work ethic, but if you don't have the discipline to keep your nose to the grind wheel and keep working it and keep staying focused, keep evolving yourself, keep learning, without that discipline, it's going to be a tougher uphill. It's always an uphill fight, right? But the discipline makes it a little bit easier sometimes.
There was a really, and we'll move on, but I will say this. I don't disagree with you on any of that. There was a really great quote. Someone once said that people do need to pull themselves up with their bootstraps, but not everybody has bootstraps.
That's right.
So,
right.
and that's where the government needs to.
Catherine Barger's got a line. I've seen her. I've
She's
heard
great.
her.
I love Catherine.
I love her too. She's a strong leader. She says, we don't want to give handouts. We want to give hand up. Right? And to your bootstrap analogy, that's the same thing. And I've seen it in my daily life when there's people who are struggling, and sometimes it's a family member, right? When they're struggling, the first thing you ask is, what are you doing to help yourself, right? And if they're helping themselves and they're working as hard as they can, then they're going to get the support, they're going to get the help they need. We can go into the homeless stuff later, but there's a little bit of a parallel we can talk to later. Just remind me about it.
Okay. Here's where I want to go with this. First, and when we had our last Republican candidate on, Suzette, I asked her the same question. So they talk about the fracture between the Democratic Party right now, but I think the Republican Party is also fractured right now as well. There are traditional conservative Republicans. Sure. There's Bill Kristol, there's Nicole Wallace, George Will, and then there are Trump Republicans. Which are you?
I'm a Mike Garcia Republican.
No, that's not an answer.
So I am further to the right on the. I'm more conservative probably than most, but I am pragmatic. And I do understand the reality of our world today. And I'm not this old politician or political activist over the last couple decades. So I look at things from a lens of really three things, and I think you've heard this before. I look at the Constitution, I look at capitalism, and I look at competition, right? And pretty much where I am on any of those, on any issues, it ties directly and correlates to those three things.
Okay, so by that argument, then, is Trump a good president?
I think Trump is a good president. Yeah, absolutely. I support the president. Look.
Now, his tax cut created a $1 trillion deficit, and you talk about fiscal responsibility.
So that's one area where Republicans are criticizing the president, right?
Okay.
And I do. I don't like the big spending. The budget bill that was passed yesterday, I haven't had a chance to go through the details of it myself. Right. Or it was passed Thursday, right? So I don't like that they lifted the spending limit again. But let's talk about the president. We had a guy who was not part of the old institution come in and say, this is what I'm going to do.
Right.
2 years later, he's done most of it.
What has he done exactly? Tell me
well,
what he's accomplished.
The economic stimulus is a big deal.
It could be argued that he is basically, and I'm not saying this is the case, but it could be argued that he is basically, Barack Obama hit a home run, and he is currently running the bases. Yeah. Because if you look at GDP growth, it was actually higher under Obama. If you look at the amount of jobs created per month and per quarter, it was actually higher under Obama. Obama, in the same amount of time, created more jobs. That's true. I'll show you the facts.
Under the same amount of time.
The same amount of
time. But that was on the heels of a massive recession. Right?
No, sir. This is the last 2 years of Obama's administration. Okay. So I'm just saying.
I haven't seen that data, but I'd like to.
I will. I'll be glad to show it to you.
Yeah. But I don't think it's that. I think that's a bad metaphor. I don't think it was Obama hitting a home run and Trump running the bases. What I think the president has done is he's taken the handcuffs off of a lot of the economic stimuli that were always there. There were always levers that could have been pulled. The Tax Cut and Jobs Act in 2018 was a big deal. It has translated into the lowest unemployment, the highest GDP that we've seen in a long time.
That's debatable also, but I mean, how do you rationalize the $1 trillion deficit that he created on that process?
Well, so he didn't create that, right? He added, so that aggravates the TCJA, the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, aggravates the deficit problem, and I think everyone's eyes wide open to that.
Okay, but you agree with that, but at the same time you're saying that was one of the benefits.
It was what started this economic pickup that we've experienced over the last several years, and I do think they need to be made permanent. Okay, so it's the spending side that I think is where we need to look at.
All right.
Okay. But let me go back to the President Trump question again, because 3 years ago, there were Americans getting their heads cut off on TV. Okay, so when you ask, what has this president done? He's taken the American troop levels in 4 different theaters on an order of magnitude reductions, in some cases 90% reductions in some of these theaters. He's put in place new rules of engagement so that the local commanders can actually go finish the mission and do what they need to do. And if you look around, we're in a relative state of peace on the macro geopolitical landscape, right?
It could be argued that we're about to walk into a war with Iran.
If things aren't done correctly, we can walk into a war with Iran. But I actually do give the president kudos for the way he's handled Iran so far. When you lose an asset that's shot down right over an international border, that could go either way. And the data and the patience and frankly the maturity level that he demonstrated during that, I think was spot on.
So you were against the Iran agreement then that Obama put together?
Yeah, I don't think there was enough oversight. I think there was.
But Mike Pompeo, before as head of the CIA, Rex Tillerson. Secretary Mad Dog, whatever his name is, the general Mattis, thank you, all acknowledged that Iran was in compliance with that agreement. It seems to me by tearing it up like he did and walking away from it, all he's done is intensified the problem and leading us inevitably to war, because they've started to enrich uranium again, and we're rattling sabers both ways. I mean,
rattling sabers. Rattling sabers is different than war, right? And so whenever there's international negotiations, whether it's economic or nuclear, those are non-warfare topics, right? That escalates and it heightens tensions, right? But two nations need to be able to negotiate. They need to be able to have discussions. They need to be able to come to the table with a fair deal that allows for the right oversight without us paying for it. Or without us eventually being the victims of the product that they produce, right? If we go to war, or if Iran attacks us,
right,
that's not on this president. That's on the actions and the leadership in Iran, okay?
I don't know if I agree with that, Mike. Come on. Now, we had an agreement. We had an international agreement, not just the United States, but other countries as well had signed that agreement.
So
and they were in compliance.
So let's talk about other agreements. Say there's another agreement, Paris Climate Accord, right? We bail on that. Does that mean Paris gets to attack us?
That's not a wartime issue. It's not an issue of that's going to take us to war. That could take us to war. I mean.
So you're saying that what was the threat if they were non-compliant? What happens to Iran?
How do you mean if they were not compliant?
If they were non-compliant with the agreement that we had in place, what was the U.S.'s stick in response to that? What would it have been?
I assume that we would have walked away from it, and then the whole thing would have escalated into where it is now. But at the time they were in compliance.
It would have been continued economic sanctions, right? Higher levels of economic. That was the result.
Which
of
have been happening for 30-something years or longer.
Right.
So which have not really resulted in much of anything.
Exactly. It hasn't, unfortunately, and it should, right? Sometimes you're dealing with irrational actors on the international stage that things like that don't matter to them.
Right.
They're okay. The rest of their people aren't. That's not something that's going to motivate them. But my point is that had they not complied with the agreement in Iran, we would have dialed up the economic sanctions. Okay, we would have made the lives of Iranians harder. Right, the leadership in Iran would have probably not been affected at all. But that in and of itself is still not a trigger for war. Right. So my point is that just because we're walking away from the table on this agreement, that's not a justification or I'd say a legitimate trigger for warfare.
No, but
to say that the president
we are in
is forcing
agreement
us into a war.
They cannot have a nuclear weapon, right? We are in agreement on that, correct?
Right,
okay.
I agree.
They were in compliance. They were not manufacturing any more uranium on the levels that was needed to create nuclear weapons. Everybody agreed that they were in compliance.
That doesn't mean that the agreement was a good deal for the U.S., right? And that agreement was signed under a different president. The president has the right to come in and look at all agreements that were signed by previous commanders-in-chief and chief diplomats and go, this is not a good deal for us, right?
But why wasn't it a good deal?
Well, I think he said it at a macro level. I haven't done the deep dive on the specifics of what his rationale was, but at a macro level, it wasn't enough oversight. It was ultimately costing us money, he's looking at it through as a long-term negotiation, and he's looking at it as at a macro level what the right thing to do for the nation is. So you can't, people can question it. As Americans, we should always question it. I think your questions are great questions, and this debate is exactly what we need. But it's tough, again, when you're the man in the arena, when you're the person in the arena with all the data in front of you, and you're getting the classified information in the background that goes along with that. We need to respect the president's decisions. We need to respect the fact that he is entitled to walk away from that deal. That walking away from the deal did turn the dial a little bit on tensions. It did put Iran in a bigger penalty box, and it may have motivated them to be a little more aggressive to us. But in the end, they're accountable for their actions towards the United States. So if we end up in a war that they start, that's not on this president. That's on the irrational actor on the other side.
Wow. I could not disagree with you more on that.
We may not agree on that one.
But I give kudos to your arguments. I think you defended yourself well there. Let's talk about, just tell me specifically why you're running for Congress. What was the motivation to do it?
You know what, I've boiled it down to this, first of all, I've always had a desire to serve my country. I've always had a compelling need to as a patriot, do what's right for my country when I feel like it's necessary. That's what led me to serve in the Navy. That's what led me into aerospace, because I still am able to provide products that supports our troops on the front lines. When I woke up after the election, and actually leading up to the election, I just had this gut feeling that she was misrepresenting herself. And we'll get into that, I'm sure. I didn't feel like she was going to be really representative of the district, and I was willing to give her the benefit of the doubt.
Did you vote for her?
I did not vote for her. No, not at all. No, I voted for Steve Knight. We'll talk about that as well, I'm sure. But the bottom line is that I don't want what's happened to my state, right, the state of California, to happen to my nation. And when I look at what's going on in our state, and more importantly, I don't want what's happened to my state to happen to my district, right? Simi Valley, Santa Clarita, and Antelope Valley, when you look at how we're doing relative to the rest of the state, we're in excellent shape compared to the San Franciscos and the downtown LAs of the world, right? And when you take a step back and you ask why, right? California, it's got one of the highest populations, the fifth largest GDP in the world. It's got a lot of tax revenue. It's not a lack of taxpayers and a lot of lack of revenue, right? In fact, it's got one of the highest tax rates, and we keep seeing more of it. Yet we're still in debt, and yet we still can't solve all of the homeless problems that the government leadership has said they're going to take care of, right? So for me, I look at that and I go, okay, that I don't want that to be the situation at the national level. Okay. And I equate it to the policy, right? When I see the results of our economy and how this revenue turns into poor policy, poor state of conditions in our downtown areas, especially San Francisco, Los Angeles, to me that is a direct result of policy and leadership. And it ends up being that it's a function of the progressive policies. It's a function of the Democrat-led state. It's a single party. It's effectively a single. There's still pockets of Republicans representing us in the state Senate and state assembly, but for the most part, what we're seeing here in this state is the result of progressive policy and Democrat policy.
The last time we had a Republican governor, though, there was a deficit. Now,
we'll agree that the deficit is a problem across the board. By the way, I think you and I are on the same page. But I think it's on the spending side.
I think though, what I see in a lot of Republicans is the screaming about the deficit, and then when they do a tax cut, and then there's it increases the deficit, they shut up about it. They don't seem to care, and
that's physics. That's just math and physics, right? So if your deficit is defined by revenue and spending, if you decrease the revenue, then you will aggravate the deficit problem. Okay.
Right. Okay.
But here's the dynamics. The fallout of decreasing that tax revenue is that now people, the big companies, right? And people talk about how Amazon didn't pay any taxes in 2018.
Right.
We can talk about that. They did. They just had enough credits, and they had enough they had carryover losses from previous years that they were applied to 2018, so that the net result was they actually got a tax refund. But they did pay taxes. But in the meantime, with all of those policies and those tax policies put in place, they were actually able to grow the number of jobs. They were able to grow their footprint in multiple states. They were able to increase wages.
Not by much. I mean, they are famous. They are famous for not taking care of
workers.
Yeah,
I wasn't aware of that. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that.
I'm from Kentucky. We have an Amazon shop at one of the hubs in Kentucky, and I can tell you from experience from people that work there that I know that they do not take care of their workers. It's a horrible, horrible job, and it pays very, very little. So the benefits that Jeff Bezos is seeing, it's not being trickled down to his employees at all.
Well, I wouldn't say not at all, right? That's a binary statement, right? So they did create jobs. They are creating more revenue. So what it is it's a short-term hit on the revenue side when you cut taxes. But over the long run, when you're creating jobs, you're creating more taxpayers at that point, right? And those businesses, as they grow, they give bigger bonuses, they give bigger salaries to their employees. So the base of income across the employment populace, which is now massive with what our 3% unemployment rates, increases. So the revenue will pick up. Where I get sideways with how our government's running right now is on the spending side.
Where do we cut then? What do we cut?
It's at the federal levels, and as someone who's running for Congress, that's what I'm looking at only right now, right? Is at the federal level, Department of Education, right?
What do you cut in the Department of Education? What is overspending?
So we need to go line by line and look at what's being spent on at the federal level at the federal level for the Department of Education.
But isn't education important
it's absolutely important. What you do is you download that scope to the lower levels. You download it to the states, and you download it to the local school unions. Okay. The people that are most relevant in terms of deciding what's right for our kids are at the lower levels. All right. So if you get rid of the bureaucracy, because that's for the most part that's what the Department of Education at the federal level is. It's a bureaucracy, and you download that cost and scope to the state and local levels. You're going to get more money going to the classrooms. You're going to get more money going to the students, and effectively remove a lot of line items from the cost side.
What about federal student loans and grants and things like that? I mean, is that something that? I mean, that's one of the big things that the Department of Education handles.
I think some of them still could exist, and again, I think it's a line by line. Anyone that comes in and says, "Hey, remove this chunk," and it goes away, remove this chunk, right? You got to look at everything line by line and make educated decisions, and it's a negotiation, obviously. But even that's not being done right now, and I think that's one of the big problems.
What about where else would you cut? What other departments?
There's levels of healthcare that also could be cut, and I've got a few examples written down here actually. Commerce and agricultural, endowments for the arts and humanities. And again, I'm not saying these things go away.
Right.
I'm saying this money is covered now at the state and local levels rather than at the federal level. And by definition, again, if you go back to what I said earlier, which is every time you add a layer, you're adding inefficiencies, right? So $1 spent on education at the federal level translates to 60 cents going to the state of California, which translates to 30, 40 cents going to the local school district. When you remove that layer and truly look at what are they doing at the federal level, and again, line by line, you bucket that money.
I have an idea then. Let's do Andrew Yang and then just forget about all government levels and just give me some money. How about that? I mean, then there's no trickle down. There's no thing. Just hand us cash.
Hand you the tax revenue.
Yeah, so hand me the tax.
So I still think and this is again, I'm a pragmatist, and I know you're jesting. But for me, the role of the government is to provide for the defense of the nation,
Okay.
to provide for things like Social Security, right? That was a contract with Americans that they needed to keep up. So there are some roles that the federal government needs to maintain. There are some things that the federal government's needed in order to maintain order.
Why not cut some of the defense budget? We have one of the largest, the largest military in the world, and I think it's like 10 times the size of the next largest army or whatever.
That's not true. China actually, I think, from a man count and technology perspective, is above us. So here's why.
Okay.
The last 30, 40 years, right? When you remember the Cold War, we had a peer called Russia, the Soviet Union. When the wall came down, that changed. We went into more of low intensity conflicts. So two things have happened in the last 20 years since 9/11. One, we've been in theaters at the same time for 20 years, right? So now we've been in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, right, concurrently. The operational tempo for our troops, right, during the last 20 years, it's starting to improve in the last few years, thanks to the president's national defense policies. But the operational tempo was brutal. It was brutal on our troops. It was brutal on their families. It was brutal on the equipment. I saw it firsthand. In 2015 through 2017, the operational readiness of our equipment in aviation, naval aviation, was at an all-time low. We had areas in certain squadrons where if you were assigned 12 aircraft, only 4 or 5 of them were flyable. It wasn't because the equipment was bad stuff, or it wasn't because the contractors weren't doing their jobs. It was because we were flying the hell out of those planes, and we had not planned to fly as much as we did from 2001 after 9/11 through 2015. That's true for the tanks. That's true for the rifles. It's true for all the military industrial equipment out there, right? So the reason why we can't cut right now on the defense side is, one, we need to take care of our troops. Katie Hill and the Democrats passed a bill that gave them a 3.1% raise, and they started bragging about it like that was a good thing. Well, I got news for you. When you look at a comparison between what our military folks are making relative to their civilian counterparts and their pay raises over the last 20 years, they're still in the hole by about 10 to 15% for equivalent skills, right? So we need to take care of our troops. We need to invest in them and their families.
Otherwise, that is just correct me if I'm wrong, that what they're talking about, the raise that they gave, that Trump signed that, correct?
That's right. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
To quote Donald Trump.
So Trump did not sign the House National Defense Authorization Act. The president's budget, so it's a long process, right? It's a year-long process. The president's budget was released earlier this year. The Senate and the House independently contemplate that budget, and they figure out so the president asked for $750 billion. The Senate concurred with that $750 billion. The House, under Nancy Pelosi, cut it by, I think, $17 billion. Okay. So they did make some cuts. They made some cuts to some vital things in our national, things like nuclear deterrence systems, submarine programs, hypersonics, which is the new threat. Okay. So they are cutting, and that 3.1% is less than what we need to be at. The president hasn't signed any of those bills yet. He waits at the end of the year. That all comes together. So in my opinion, we've got to get our military a 5% pay raise. That starts chipping away at the gap between what they're making.
But I mean, there's a lot of people that would say, I mean, the myth, I don't know how much of this is true, about toilet seats costing $600.
Right.
I mean, that the defense situation in the budget is so big, and so much a blank check that there's no.
So I've been through it. So this is a bit unfair, but we sell product to the Pentagon, and we aerospace companies. The Pentagon has some of the most, I'll call them, intrusive auditing and cost control measures than any industry in the world, okay? These aerospace companies, and a lot of them are here in this district, right?
Okay.
These guys aren't making 100% profit rates. They're making 15 to 18% profit. So it's not like this is a cash cow industry where people are taking advantage of the system. That's the opposite, actually. If you were to adapt a commercial model or have a commercial company come in and go, hey, we need you to make this display, they'd go, hey, I can do that. I'll make it cheap, right? And then you tell them, well, you can't make more than 15, 18% profit. They're going to go, we're out, right? They're going to go make a display for someone else. And that's literally what happens. That's why there's so few defense companies, is not very many commercial businesses want to get into it. But the reason it's so expensive is, this happened yesterday. I was at the mall with my 2-year-old, going to go take a picture, whip out my phone. Camera doesn't come up. I'm sitting there clicking on the camera. Come on, and I miss the moment, right? That is an acceptable error for someone with a commercial camera like you and I. When I go off the front end of an aircraft carrier and I have that same display technology, which is a big iPad on the front of the jet, that thing can't freeze, right? That thing can never turn off just because it's allowed to every 1,000 hours, right? And that requirement for it to work 100% of the time came from the Pentagon, which came from State Department or OSD, Secretary of Defense, and it's because it saves lives. So when you go to a company and you say, hey, I need you to build a touch screen tablet that he's going to control the whole plane through, it needs to be able to take a screwdriver through it and still function, and it can never shut off. Right, that's when you start seeing the higher price points, and I think people need to appreciate the 10,000-pound hammer is another good example, right? And there's literally hammers that cost 10,000, but when you launch that into space, that hammer only weighs 4 ounces instead of 12 ounces, and the cost to put something in space is $10,000 a pound, right? So you're saving the money. But it is a stigma.
I was thinking about Daryl Park, who's a candidate this year against Catherine Parker, once told me a story about NASA was spending buco amount of bucks just to try and figure out how to get a pen that would write in space.
Right.
But the Russians used a pencil. So
that's funny.
I always found that interesting.
That is funny.
Let's talk a little bit about the race itself. I'll say honestly, this is kind of a real make or break moment for this election. I mean, for this district. We've had Republicans for as far back as I can remember, with Buck McKeon particularly, for years and years and years, and then Steve Knight coming in.
Yep.
And then Katie Hill comes in. The demographics have changed out here, and some said it's still a conservative district, some have said it's a Democratic district now, some say it's a purple district. I think this election is going to define what it is, really.
I do too. Yep.
Let me ask you first off about your voting record.
Yep.
Okay. Some Facebook trolls have been accusing you of not voting in 3 or 4 different elections. Is that correct?
They're accusing me of not voting in 3 elections. So here's the record, for the record. I did vote in 2018.
Okay.
I voted for Knight. I voted through an absentee ballot, and I did so in 2014. Neither of those were counted. I've spent a lot of hours with the county election offices and the county registrar's office, and they did confirm that the ballots are there. They were processed late. Okay, so in the case of 2018, election day was 8 November. My ballot was processed on 17 November. Okay, so voters out there, here's the lesson learned, right? I'm embarrassed by it because I consider myself to be an educated realist. But here's the deal: if you vote by mail, right, you won't get a notification. If your signature doesn't match, they'll send you a letter and says your signature didn't match. Redo the signature, make it look like what's on your driver's license, send it back in, your vote will count. If you send it in the day before the election, the day of the election, and even if it's there, it may not get processed in time.
Okay.
When that happens, they don't send you a notification that says your vote didn't get counted. Okay. So until I was in this race and became subject to all of the FOIA requests.
Welcome to it.
Right, exactly.
Welcome to the race.
Which is that's part of the gig, right? So I knew it was coming. I was as shocked as anyone else when I saw that record. I was like, "Whoa! How did that happen?" Right?
Is there any kind of record of you looking into these votes, or that? I mean,
it's all phone calls over the last couple of weeks. This past week, I spent several hours with them, and I did ask them if they would send a letter or some sort of testimony or affidavit, and they don't. They just don't do that. They understood my position and where I was at, but there is no evidence of it.
Of 3 different elections, all 3 times they've lost your vote.
No. So in 2016, I voted in the primary in 2016.
Okay.
In 2018, I was called to McKinney, Texas, for what ended up being about a $12 billion bid. We had 3 other companies with us. That we were in a team with about 200 people in a room. It was unplanned. I got extended there. I was the lead, and it was one of those gut-wrenching moments where I had to make a decision. And we needed to finish what we were working on there. So I take that full responsibility. That's a hit on me. I'm not proud of it. I wish I didn't have to make that decision, and it makes me sick to my stomach that I wasn't able to vote in 2016. But that was my reality at the time. I wasn't a political activist, and I had a task that I needed to close on.
Okay.
That unfortunately was the reality.
All right. Well, okay. Well, whatever. I don't doubt what you're saying is true. People have been asking about it.
Yeah.
So.
No, absolutely. That's the topic du jour.
We are going long. I just want to make sure you're still comfortable.
I'm
with
good.
saying,
Yeah.
Because I got
maybe another 10 minutes.
another 10 minutes. We'll see. We'll see how this goes.
Maybe I'm talking too much. Let you talk.
We'll go for lightning rounds or something. First, I want let's talk actually about. First off, define socialism for me. What is socialism?
Socialism is a mentality to me where you are banking on the government to take care of you, and it goes back to our earlier conversation. It's where the government is actually providing you things, whether it's food or resources or income, and there is no sort of degrees of success. There's no reward for performance. There's no recognition of someone working harder than someone else. So that is socialism.
And you think Katie Hill's a socialist?
So I think Katie Hill supports policies that are socialist.
Such as?
So the idea of giving, well, first of all, on the illegal immigration, and hopefully we can talk about that.
We are going to talk about that.
I just went to the border last week, so that's a good thing. Saying you're going to give free health care and free education to illegal immigrants is a quintessential socialist position. That is hard-earned taxpayer revenue at the federal level in the federal coffers. It's coming from our district, from people who have worked hard, getting applied and given to.
Has Congresswoman Hill actually come out for those policies?
Yeah.
When did she say that?
So she said it several times. We'll have to bring it up. But one of the bills, the Hope and Dream Act, effectively said that. And
for DACA people, right? Correct? Is that
no?
It was not for DACA people.
It was DACA. DACA was a subset, which is okay. Let's have that debate. But it was beyond that. There was no age limit. You could be a 40-year-old convicted felon, and you fell underneath the auspices of the Hope and Dream Act. And that's one of the problems, is they create these acts and they use the language, and it's a political thing, right? So probably both parties are guilty of it the same way. You give it a name that sounds like something everyone wants. The American Dream and Promise Act is actually what it is. It's H.R. 6,
the
right?
Patriot Act is an example of that as well.
The Patriot Act. Yeah, there's a lot of them, right? Yeah. And that's the name. No one who's writing a bill is going to give it a name that doesn't sound
Nobody's going to
right?
vote against the Patriot
So
Act.
what they're counting on is no one really reads the details below it, right? But when you read the details, and I think this is one of the problems we're seeing in Congress right now, right? The House is writing bills that at first blush don't look that offensive, and the natural reaction is, why Senator McConnell, why would you not bring this up for a debate, right? But when you read through it and you read the details, there's Easter eggs in there, right? What I call pumpkin bombs. They're bigger than Easter eggs. You read it and you go, that's got nothing to do with Dream and Promise Act, right? So things like, when you read the details and you go, hey, there's no age stipulation here. There's no convicted felon. A pedophile, 40-year-old pedophile would fall under the Dream and Promise Act, regardless of criminal history, right? So within that is where the health care and education benefits for illegal immigrants resides.
Okay. Okay. Well, all right.
By the way, it's not a one-time thing. I mean, if you go look at not only the way she's voting and the content of those bills that she's voting on, but also her words, she's saying these things and she's owning it. It's not like she's denying it. She's owning it. When you say things like yesterday, when you bring up redistricting, right? There's redistricting coming up here pretty soon, and when you say things in the public media about, hey, it's all old white guys right now, right? That's just divisive behavior. That's divisive language.
No, but the Trump administration has, by putting the citizenship question on the census, and it has been exposed by a GOP operative who's now dead, that the whole game plan was to keep control to white men. I'll be happy to show you the information.
I haven't seen that myself.
It's literally been a plan. And do you not agree that a question about citizenship, particularly right this time with ICE raids and things like that, is not going to be answered in a census question, or the census is not going to get filled out by certain people?
I think it runs a risk of not being answered. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I think there's inefficiencies there as well, right? When you ask that question nowadays, yeah. So again, but that's a good academic debate to have, and we can go on for hours about that.
But I guess my point is, what Congressman.
But that doesn't excuse behavior, right? So again, it goes kind of to the Iran thing. You can be in a conversation and someone can say something or do something, or a situation can be a certain way. But as a congresswoman, that doesn't entitle you to behave in a certain way.
Well,
right?
does that entitle the president to behave in a certain way? I mean, look at the behavior of our president right now. I mean, hasn't he said some things that are pretty outlandish or racist even?
I don't think he said anything racist. I think
you don't think going back home where he came from is a racist statement?
No, I don't. I think what you just said is what his tweet was is not a racist statement. And we can pull up the tweet and go through it. But when you look at what he tweeted, I do not believe it's a racist statement. Do I like the way his delivery is all the time? Larry Elder used this metaphor at one of my events a couple weeks ago, which I think is perfect, right? When you look at golfers, there's some that have the perfect backswing, perfect follow through, and then the ball goes off into the woods.
Or you could be like Trump and cheat.
You're ruining my metaphor.
Sorry, I apologize.
I think we had that in Obama, where everything looked smooth, and then the foreign policy was a mess. Personally, and I think he did a lot of things wrong. We have a president right now that his swing's maybe not the best, his delivery's not the best, but the ball's landing in the right spot in terms of what's going on with our economy, what's going on with our national defense and our national security. I don't know if everyone always agrees with the way anyone
right, but I mean, you're basically complaining about Congresswoman Hill's behavior and the things she says, but defending, I guess you are defending what the president says and does.
I'm criticizing Congressman Hill's behavior. I'm criticizing the way she's voting, the inconsistencies. In one hand, she complains about the crisis at the border and the humanitarian crisis, and we're not doing enough. And then when the vote comes up to send the $4.5 billion to the detention facilities to improve their situation, she votes no. I'm criticizing Congresswoman Hill because she's complaining about the president. She's publicly going out and giving video speeches calling him a criminal, despite the fact the Mueller investigation showed that he wasn't a criminal. Wow. We can debate that. That's a debate. Yeah. He's not a criminal. Okay.
He hasn't been convicted.
Okay, so if you truly believe that as a congresswoman, why did you vote no on the impeachment side, right? So it's that behavior pattern that bugs me more than anything. Don't be all talk and then not act on it.
Well, I'll agree with you. I would say that my biggest beef with Congresswoman Hill right now is the fact that she is openly saying that he's a criminal. On this podcast here, she said, he committed a crime. I established that in that question I asked. Okay, if he's committed a crime, impeach. That is what if you believe that.
Or if you've seen evidence that someone else hasn't seen, then bring it forward, right? You're extending the problem if you don't do that, right?
I do think. Well, I have problems with both parties, but but I'll say this: I think right now the Democrats have made it very clear that they lack spine. If either impeach or don't,
and that's where I'm going, right? Yeah. People are gonna disagree with me on the issues. People are gonna you're gonna you and I have been able to have a very good, open conversation. We can agree on everything.
Absolutely.
But you know where I'm coming from,
absolutely,
and you understand the rationale.
I do. You know what, Mike? I think you're explaining yourself extremely well and defending your policies and positions very well. I may not agree with all of them, and I think some of them are questionable, in my opinion. But I do think you
and that's what makes this country great.
Yeah.
And to be honest, to go back, that's why this state is not great. We don't have enough of this dialogue. We don't have enough opposition and checks and balances, and there's no one accountable from one side of the party to the next, right?
We're going to have to go to a lightning round kind of situation.
Let's go to the border real quick. So
okay,
No, I'm sorry. I just sweated my butt off out there in Yuma for about.
Let's talk about the border.
115 degrees out there. So I went down there, right? And again, this goes to what you talked about. I don't respect people that say it's terrible down there. We need to do something. Okay, well, what's terrible about it? Go see it. Go tell me what to do about it, right? So I literally decided to go down there, and we were, in the Yuma sector, just south of Yuma, Arizona, on the northern side of the border, obviously. And what I saw and what I heard was facts and data that clarified a lot of the debate about the border, okay? First of all, from 2017 to 2019, it quadrupled. The number of illegal crossings quadrupled.
Why do you think that was?
I think it is first of all, lack of a physical barrier, and also people being incentivized to come here. Okay, one of the things that one of the patrol agents was talking about was every time someone talks amnesty, every time someone votes on a bill, and this Dream and Promise Act was an example of it, they see dramatic spikes in illegal immigration. So it's this mentality from people who are wanting to come here. And most of them are not criminals, by the way, right? Most of them are just coming here for a better life.
You know what, though? I mean, I was looking at your editorial you put in the Signal. Mm-hmm. Your argument seemed to be that most of the immigrants coming across that border are drug cartel or gangs. I mean, you more than implied that was almost everything.
So that's true. So 10 years ago, it was 80% narcotics, and this is something I learned last week before I wrote the article. 10 years ago, 80% of the traffic coming through was narcotics, or mules carrying narcotics, right? And 20% was human trafficking. What we're seeing now this year and over the last about 12 months, I think is what they said, is it's 50-50. Half of it is drug narcotics, narco dealers, and half of it is human trafficking, okay? Now, they're paying anywhere from $7,000 to $10,000 per person to come across.
Where'd you get those stats from?
From the CBP.
Okay.
Yep, at the UNICEF.
Okay.
So what's happening is these what they're called. I had never heard this term, transnational criminal organization, TCU. Mm-hmm. It's the folks on the southern side of the border, and it's the folks on the northern side of the border. It's a whole organization. Some of them are Americans even, right? On the southern side of the border, they ferry them up to the border. They literally come up to the most vulnerable part in the wall, or the most vulnerable part of the barrier. In some cases, no wall at all. They hand them $7,000. They escort them across.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. Okay, you do acknowledge though that not all immigrants coming across the border are necessarily criminals. I mean, not all of them are, or do you believe the majority are?
So, do you acknowledge that coming across an international border illegally is a crime?
Well, not if they're requesting amnesty, and it's also just a misdemeanor.
So if exactly, but it is a crime. It's a misdemeanor. So
okay.
I'll give you that.
Speeding.
Yeah. So exactly.
Okay.
So am I when I'm doing 90 and a 60, is that a crime? Yes.
But they don't take away my kid over the result.
I'll talk about that because I asked that question. So on amnesty, only 10% of the people that are coming across are asking for amnesty right now. 2/3 of those people are approved. Okay, it's like 6.4 out of 10 get amnesty. Mm-hmm. The reason there's not more people asking for amnesty is because the normal process of coming over here and asking to just be in the country until your court date is less than 20 days. The amnesty process can be months, right? So now I got to hang out in Yuma, I got to wait for my amnesty court dates, and they're going to supervise me.
You think the facilities are something somebody wants to hang out in for months?
No, and that's why they're not asking for amnesty. Right? Mm-hmm. If they ask for amnesty, they're there for an extended period of time. If you don't ask for amnesty and all you say is, I have a sponsor, they pick up the phone, they call your sponsor, right, who's someone who's probably on the payroll in Arizona, and they say, hey, do you know so-and-so? They say, yeah, that's my niece. Okay, great, can you come pick her up? Yep. So in the time it takes them to come pick them up, there's a couple days there, they give them paperwork, and it says, here, you're not an American citizen, you're allowed to stay in the country until your court date comes and goes, and be at this court on this date at this location.
Right.
Here's your ankle bracelet. Your sponsor, your aunt, is now here, and
I believe that's an Obama policy, right?
That's an Obama policy.
Right, and to my understanding on that policy, it costs $35 a day, and 95% of the people showed back up for the court dates.
I'd like to see when that was from, because that's not the case today.
No, but see, the case today...
well, so what happened under that dynamic was people were asking for amnesty or being detained in the facilities for a longer period of time. The vast plurality of the people that are going across now, and it's close to 700,000 in this sector, don't show up for the court date. So these are truly undocumented human beings from various countries.
I know,
so by the way, it's not a Mexico, it's not a racist thing, it's just people.
I know, but I guess my thing is, part of it is I don't think migrants that are coming here to this country, by the most part, are dangerous people. And I don't have a problem with even opening the borders. I mean, in a certain sense, the mules that you're talking about and things like that, the drug trafficking, what if the borders were open? It's sort of like decriminalizing marijuana. You know what I mean? It's like you take out the element of it being illegal, and you take out a lot of the problem right there.
What's your favorite animal?
What's my favorite animal?
Yeah.
I don't...
It's going to be a land... Let's say koala bear, right?
Okay, koala bear.
Everyone loves koala bears. They're the cutest,
but they bite.
hostile
I'm
thing.
told they bite.
They can bite once in a while, I think, right? So you're told, you work for National Geographic, and you're told, hey, Stephen, we need you to go observe koalas in their natural habitat for the purpose of, promoting their existence and helping them flourish in the wild. Okay, so you go out there and you film them, you watch them all day, and you take care of them, you build relationships with some of them, and you love koala bears, right? But when you come back to your little shack in the woods where you've been watching the koala bears, you're not going to leave the door open. You're not going to leave a bunch of eucalyptus leaves on the table. You've set a boundary layer there. You've set something for your own protection, for your kids if they're with you. You've set a protection layer so that as cute as they are and as much as we love them, we can't accommodate them all, and that's basically what the Border Patrol agents are saying.
Isn't coming to,
you can't. You want to talk about debt, you want to talk about spending, and with all the entitlements, if we, especially
an illegal immigrant is not allowed to collect entitlements. I mean, you can't. You have to show proof of citizenship to even receive food stamps, for example.
Right. So. But if these bills get passed that Katie Hill is voting for, they can, and that's the dangerous thing, right? So what I'm saying is, it's three putts, right?
Okay.
The first putt is you build a wall. You build a physical barrier to make it so that people can't do what you just described. You stop incentivizing them. Let me just finish my point.
Sure.
But you stop incentivizing them, but you also then, the third putt is to give the resources to the folks on the border, the Border Patrol agents, both on the south and the north, because that they do monitor the Canadian border as well, right? So they have 18,000 people on the books right now. They're required to be at 20,000. And when I asked them, I said, what's the right number to do this job? They said 25 to 27,000 people. So they're literally down 50% from what they need to do to just do their job, right? So they're struggling. They don't like, and again, I asked about, do you separate kids? They don't separate kids. Okay?
That's not true, Mike.
If you come across, and again, I'm at one sector, right? So I'll caveat everything that I don't know what's going on in Texas. I don't know what's going on in New Mexico, right? But what they said is, if you come across and that child is your child and you are a true family unit, you stay with your family, and they hold them as a family unit in the detention facilities. If you come across and that they're not your relative, then obviously you're separated. But if you come across and you've got narcotics on you, or a weapon, or any other what I'd call felony level crime, right, they're going to separate you from your child. Just like if you get a DUI, it's a misdemeanor. But if you get a DUI and your kid's in your car, you're going to get separated from your child in that case, right? I don't want my kid going to the detention facility with me in that case. I don't want them going to the prison.
So you would rather them be put in, essentially, kids in cages?
It's not cages. They've been revamping it, and this is where the money is needed, right? So again, if you don't want the facilities that are already there and they've been there for 20, 30 years to be used, then throw more money at it and let them facilitize, let them build a better detention facility. In some cases, they're using these chain link fences as detention facilities. It's not a dog cage, it's not a dog kennel. But in what they're doing in Yuma, it's a more open space. It's actually an open space. They're using these new temporary tents in their large air-conditioned facilities, so the families are in there all together.
What do you think?
But yeah, no one likes kids in cages. What do
you think about the child separation policy? Is that something you support? Zero tolerance.
So I believe in zero tolerance.
Okay.
Thou shalt not cross an international border illegally. Period. And I go back to. As a father, if those conditions were that bad, I would never subject my kids to those conditions. I would do it legally, just like my grandfather did. Okay, I look back at what my grandfather did and what my dad did when they came here legally, And I look back at the last 43 years of my life and everything that I've been blessed to experience, and I thank God that they did it legally. Had they not, I wouldn't have been able to go to Annapolis. I wouldn't have been able to go to Georgetown or fly the best fighter jets in the world and live in the best district in the country and have the best family in the world. I'm truly blessed as a result of their actions and my hard work. To fathom, hey, we're gonna get on a train or we're gonna cross this desert with my 2-year-old and my 12-year-old. To me, I don't see it. I don't understand it.
Well, okay. Let me ask you a question. You acknowledge this is a nation of immigrants, right?
Yes, absolutely,
okay.
Absolutely.
Immigration policy when your grandfather came here, radically different than it is today.
Yep.
From what I understand, to come across the border and apply for citizenship and everything like that, it can be like a 20-year wait period.
It's long, yeah.
Yeah.
But there's people doing it, right? And you're here. It's not that you don't come here.
But let me ask you this, okay? Here's my question for you, and this is for anybody that has issues with the border itself. It seems to me that the idea of leaving your country, of wherever you grew up at, and bringing your family over a harrowing journey to come to the United States in hopes of establishing a better life in America is the very heart of what America is about.
That's right.
Is it not the most American thing in the world to do, to come to this country to try and make a better life for yourself?
But it is, but there's a process to do that, right? And the problem with the way things are on the southern border right now is that we're effectively allowing a separate process to occur. And when we do that, by not having a physical barrier, by offering dreams and hopes and other I'll call it entitlements, and then not having an enforcement mechanism on the backside when they get into the country, you're allowing a separate process to exist. And all I'm saying is, I want the immigrants, right? I want this country to continue to be the land of immigrants, but do it legally. There's no reason why someone who's been going through this process for 10 years to be a legal immigrant should be cut in front of because someone decided to subject their family to this alternative process. It's dangerous. It's not good for them. It's not good for the illegal border crossers. It's a very dangerous situation. I was out there for 2 hours and I almost passed out, right? I'm probably softer than most coming across. But,
no, you haven't hung out with me yet.
But you look at that and you go, what? If we take these actions, close the border, stop incentivizing them, put the right resources, you'll close down that alternative process. And by definition, people will still want to come to America. People will still want to be Americans with all the pursuit, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness that we're here to offer. They're just going to do it in a less dangerous way, and we're going to be able to know who they are and when they got here, and we'll be able to keep track of who's in our country. So I get what you're saying. The reality is you can't just open the borders and go, hey, we're open for business. I'm going to have koala bears everywhere in my shack.
Because they bite.
And they bite. They eventually bite you. So,
all right. Can you give me 15 more minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me. First of all, let me ask you this. You just to establish, you do agree with Trump's immigration policy, correct? Is that based on
what specific element are you asking about? That's a broad
zero tolerance.
Question. Yes, zero tolerance. So the flip side of that conversation is every time they said, or someone on the U.S. side talked about zero tolerance, they saw a dramatic decline in illegal crossing. So yes, zero tolerance.
But you just said that the illegals, the amount of immigration coming across the border right now is at.
Right.
Is it possible?
These are temporary, dips and spikes,
right.
But overall, the average is doubled.
I just have a theory that the Trump policy, though, is actually encouraging the problem in the sense of like the restaurant that you love but you never go to because you used to go there all the time. When they announce that they close, there's a huge line to get in. And so, in the sense that he is threatening to close the border and make it tougher to get into this country.
And that may be some of it, right? Mm-hmm. The window's closing, so let's get through it right now.
That's exactly what I think's happening.
And that's why it's so dangerous that we're not building the wall right now, right? But it's the combination of all of those other things as well. It's the incentivization of getting here, right? The lack of control, lack of enforcement once they get here. All of that combines to lead to the problem. It's not. This is nothing earth-shattering. But this is why this is why a lot of folks in this district are so frustrated by the fact that you do need to have a physical barrier there.
How do you build a wall over the Rio Grande down, by the way? I'm just curious.
Over the Rio Grande, it parallels the Rio Grande.
Okay.
Yeah, you parallel the Rio Grande.
You have to cross the Rio Grande at some point.
Maybe there's probably some spot where,
Yeah.
but don't ever doubt 150 years ago people would ask
What about
how
taking
you
property
fly off of an aircraft carrier.
To build that wall, though, you will have to use eminent domain on people's properties.
You got me there. I don't know. We'd have to go look at parcel by parcel.
But
Most likely,
is
yeah.
that something
Most
you
likely.
support, the idea that the government can seize property to build a wall?
I don't like it. That's a reality.
Mm-hmm.
We wouldn't have a lot of the freeways that we have and a lot of the infrastructure that we have without eminent domain.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something anyone really likes.
Okay, but I mean,
but
that's going to happen a lot if they try and build this wall.
It may, but I think if you go down and you talk to some of these ranchers down there along the southern border, right, in Texas, Arizona, and you ask them, hey, here's the trade space, right? First of all, it's a negotiation, so they're not necessarily taking all your land. They're just trying to figure out where we can and can't build, right? So go have that conversation. But I bet you that a lot of them would be willing to give up a little bit in order to secure this nation's border security, national security. It's a national security issue, right? It truly is.
Okay, well, let's move on to a couple of. Susan Watker is going to kill me if I do not bring up healthcare with you briefly.
Okay.
Would you have voted against voted for the repeal of the Affordable Care Act that Steve Knight did?
That one I'm still debating, right? I don't like the Affordable Care Act.
Why don't you like
it? It's not affordable. Again, it goes to, they give it these names and they make it sound good, and when you read it, it's not affordable. One, you couldn't keep your doctor. That was a promise, right? You couldn't keep your doctor. My premiums didn't go down. My deduction limits didn't go down. They went up.
There were thousands of people, though, that, particularly in this district, your district, were able to get health insurance for the first time because of it.
Yep. So I think we got to figure out. So the reason why I would get rid of it is it's a forcing function, right? The way it's existing right now, it's an answer, but it's not a good answer for some of the reasons we just discussed.
I think Joe Biden calls it a start. I mean that.
So if it's a start, and so does Katie Hill, she calls it a marker, right? She talks about markers. We're putting markers out. But you got to progress towards those markers if that's the case. If it's a start, then where's the next evolution of it?
Right.
What have you done, right? So, again, it's tough, and no one's saying, and I've made this comment on another show. If anyone says they have the answer for healthcare, they're lying. Obviously, no one has the answer, but you have to evolve it, and you've got to figure out where the efficiencies are, the loopholes are. I think ACA or the Unaffordable Care Act is flawed enough to start over, and I think by vetoing it or getting it off the books, you're creating a forcing function for Congress to actually go do something.
Okay, I'm fine with you believing that, but I will tell you that from what I've read from economists, because it's so wedged into the system now, it's almost like Brexit. It's
tough now. Yeah,
it will just destroy parts of the economy and the healthcare system without trying to just fix it instead of trying to repealing it completely.
So ideally, what you ideally would like to see out of Congress is a parallel initiative occurring below it, right? That's not active, but they're getting all the framework done. They're getting all the big muscle movements, put on, and eventually there's a system there that when we start doing a transition, there is a fallback plan for people to transition into the new system.
What about a public option? What do you think about a public option?
Meaning single payer type?
No, like a government-run healthcare system. Not in the sense of like Medicare for all, but the option to enroll in a government-run health insurance system instead of private insurance if you chose to.
Yeah, I mean, you can argue that's good. Again, I just keep going. Like I had federal health care, right? In the military, we had federal health care.
But it would be an option.
It was free, and I know I'm getting to the answer. It was free, but in a lot of cases we got what we paid for, right? So I keep coming back to if you're going to the government for help, you're going to be disappointed. And having it as an option, put it out there as an option, but it's going to be super inefficient. It's going to be another layer of bureaucracy. It's going to be another organization that the government sucks at. And that we're spending a lot of money on. I
think you're judging it before it happens, though.
I've seen it. The VA is the VA is that the military health.
The idea, though, I think the point, though, is with the public option. I'm not saying it would be efficient. I'm not saying it'd be great or anything.
Right.
But by offering something through the government that was not requiring to make money necessarily. It might force the other insurance companies to bring their costs and other medical costs down to compensate so that not everybody runs to the government-run system. That is kind of the argument.
I don't think there's very many examples of a government organization being a true competitor to a commercial organization to the level where you actually see costs come down. That's not the case in the universities, right? So I don't think that would happen. It may.
I don't know. I went to a
bigger
public university because it was cheaper than a private college.
Yeah. You went to, yeah, that's true. But where are the prices for the public universities right now, right? They're up there as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
To me, the real answer is put as many horses on the track as you can, right? If you want to see how fast your insurance company can go, if you want to see how low cost they can get, open it up. I'm a metaphor guy if you haven't figured it out. I relate it to the car insurance and the home insurance business where, when you get into an accident and you get hurt and you total your car and God forbid you kill someone, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars of a bill, right? Mm-hmm. That's not an unusual scenario, unfortunately. That happens regularly. But for some reason our car insurance premiums aren't $8,000 a year and our deductibles aren't $4,000 a year. It's $800 and $600 or whatever it is. The reason that is because there's more competition, there's more vendors. I can go to Arizona and I can go to Wisconsin and talk to a company and I move all the levers, I determine what I need and what I want, I pay that, and they cover a commensurate with what I pay. You got 2 or 3 options, and in my own company, which is a great company with great benefits, I had 2 or 3 options, and they were all expensive. And by the way, I'm not happy with the service I'm getting. So now I've got a high-priced product that sucks. I'm not happy with it, and I can't go anywhere. So to me, competition's good. We need,
all right.
We need a green gecko to
be
help us out.
Let's do the lightning round.
All right.
Super lightning round. Okay.
Sounds good.
Buck McKeon has endorsed you.
Yes.
How do you feel about his links to Saudi Arabia right now and working as a lobbyist for Saudi Arabia?
Yeah. Look, the U.S. government does business with Saudi Arabia,
mm-hmm.
right?
Is it 17 or 18 of the hijackers from 9/11 were Saudi Arabians?
Yeah.
The murder of Khashoggi?
I don't think he's doing business with those folks.
No, I know, but I'm just saying.
In the end, look, he's served his country. He's now a private citizen with a private business. He made those decisions. If you're asking me, would I take an account from a Saudi Arabia? Probably not. I probably wouldn't have done that.
Will you choose the district over party?
No, absolutely.
You would not choose the district over party?
Oh, would I choose the district over party? Yes, I would choose the district over party. Sorry, I heard the question backwards.
The Constitution over district and party?
I would choose the Constitution in every scenario. Yep. And what I would do, and part of this is communication, right? If something was coming up that I felt strongly about as a constitutionalist, and I knew that, hey, maybe this isn't going to be either observed well or embraced by my constituents. The key is to go out and communicate the why and the rationale, and here's where I'm coming from. That being said, as a representative of this district, if I go have that conversation and I impart what I think is the right answer, and in response I'm hearing very good arguments, right, from people like you who go, hey, Mike, I think here's why you're wrong, and here's why it's not necessary. It's I'm malleable, right? So it's not it's to me, I think what I'm saying is it's never a hard and fast, I'm going to choose this over that. I'm always going to have an educated conversation. It's going to be a deliberation both internally and externally with the right folks. And in the end, it's what's right for the district.
You support Trump. Would you vote for him again in the election if there was another Republican candidate against him?
I would vote for Trump.
Absolutely.
The results. The results, to me, results matter. And I think that's what this district's thirsty for, someone who's going to say what they are going to do, but then also close on those actions. And you can't argue with the results that we're getting.
Have you ever voted for a Democrat?
No.
Do you have any Democratic ideals?
No, not ideal. There's issues where you can squint and go, hey, that sounds pretty liberal of you, right?
Yeah.
Climate change is one of those.
I wouldn't say that about you, Mike.
Well, if there's any question, there are issues once in a while that you come across, and in a vacuum you formulate your own opinions, mm-hmm. and then you go to find out, and you go, wow, the Democrat Party is that way, right? That's not very often, but there are things out there that are, but the Democrat Party ideals, no, there's nothing there that I.
Do you believe in reaching across the aisle?
Absolutely. I think as Americans, as legislators, they have a responsibility to compromise, right? That's why I love the John Adams. Most of my reading is the Founding Fathers, the Founding Brothers, 1776. They in some cases really didn't like each other, right? But they worked together, they figured it out, and they got through the process. And there's a lot of opportunity for that right now.
Are you familiar with QAnon? QAnon. It's a website or a web person that's been talking about conspiracy theories.
No, I'm not familiar with it.
You're not familiar with it?
No.
Okay. Some of your relatives on Facebook are. So I had to ask.
Okay.
Do you believe in climate change?
I think the world is 4.3 billion years old, right? It'd be a miraculous coincidence if this was the first time in its life that the climate wasn't changing. I think
it's not man-made, though.
So I think there's some implications of man-made products to the climate. And this is again one of those issues where maybe I'm not as far right as you would think, but I think what it boils down to is we need to keep looking at it. We need to keep and analyzing the data. That when you look at 10, 20, 30 years, the margin of error on our predictions is off the chart. So the bottom line is I don't think we should do anything that derails our economy. The Green New Deal was, good Lord, that would have torpedoed our economy. So I think that short-sighted sort of pandering is completely useless. But I do think we got to keep an eye on it and continue to gather.
We have 12 years, according to the scientists right now.
Right. No,
12 years.
According to AOC and some of her scientists that she's pulling from. We'll see if she's right. But I think we got to do everything that we can as human beings to protect our country, protect our planet, and being conservative by our nature, conservationist.
You accused Katie Hill of. You pointed out that Katie Hill accused the president of pretend facts and acting like a toddler.
She said that. Those were her words.
Her words.
Yeah.
Okay. Does the president lie?
I don't know. I haven't.
You don't know if
I
he
don't know
lies.
if I'm not aware of a
Never
case.
seen him lie ever.
Have I seen him lie? I don't think so. No. Have you seen him lie? Give me an example of when he's lied.
Yeah, I believe the New York Times counted out over 10,000 lies since he's been president that he said on the record to people about things and different prospects, different things. Even the idea of obviously I'm not a fan of Trump.
No, I can tell.
So you don't think he's a liar?
So all humans have lied, right? So if the definition of being a liar is that he's lied, then yes, he's but.
Well, let me give you a real simple one, and we'll lead it into the last part of our little thing here. We're 2 minutes out, I promise.
Okay.
Because I'm enjoying this. I really am enjoying your conversation. So, an example is no collusion, no obstruction. He says constantly. Tweets it constantly. It's like just like a song at this point for him, singing it along, everywhere he goes. Now, based on that, the collusion thing's debatable, I suppose. But obstruction, there are 10 counts in the Mueller report of possible obstruction, 5 that are considered extremely credible, of which over 1,000 Republicans and Democrats have both said could be prosecuted for obstruction of justice. Do you agree with that, or do you think he is completely?
So if they believe that, then do it, right? But
this is Congress.
Look, I read that section, right, and I don't believe that there was obstruction.
You don't think telling Don McGahn to change records and fire Mueller is obstruction of justice, and then changing?
Not under the definition that's provided for obstruction of justice. There's 3 qualifiers to be that, right? And in all of those. I believe Mueller himself, or whoever wrote the report, not sure Mueller did it now based on everything we saw this past week, but there was no intent to obstruct, right? So that.
Well, then why was he telling people that? Well, what was the goal to cover things up? Why was he doing that? If that wasn't obstruction of justice, what was it?
Look, you have a right to defend yourself, right? It's scary. So here's you have a government investigating you, right? And as a president of the United States, he has the right and responsibility to execute his job, right? And if he sees that that's a threat to executing his job and as the President of the United States, he's allowed to do that.
Is he above the law?
No one's above. I don't think anyone's above the law. But again, we have a justice system in place for a reason, and to call someone a criminal before they've been tried, before they've been convicted, goes against the Constitution.
Let's be clear, though. Now, the Southern District of New York has put Michael Cohen in jail for campaign finance problems, campaign finance violations, a felony account that was instructed to him to do by Donald J. Trump. Okay, that's a felony, and Michael Cohen presented evidence to the Oversight Committee where Katie Hill actually asked that question. So, I mean, Katie Hill...
So what did she do in response to that?
That's not my question. I'm asking you, knowing that, if a congressperson, would you walk away from party, just like Justin Amash did, and say, this is an impeachable offense?
If there was enough evidence, and I know what you just said, basically, on that topic, okay? So I'm aware of Cohen and all the stuff. I haven't done deep dives on everyone that's been convicted under this investigation. If there's enough evidence and you believe that something criminal happened, then you should follow through on it. I don't think that's the case here. I think the Mueller report was another government deliverable that was terrible, right? They got what they paid for. I think the Democrat Party who started this investigation used
No, they didn't start the investigation. Let's be clear. Jeff Sessions did, and appointed Rosenstein, who actually created. And Robert Mueller is a Republican. So let's be clear about that.
So you got to look at why they used Robert Mueller, right? His mental condition in that testimony was not there. Right? That didn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
You get to the point where you actually start feeling sorry for the guy, but that didn't happen overnight. So you got to look back and go, okay, where was he in this whole process, and who took advantage of that, and unfortunately, my takeaway from all of this after 2 years is that it was a waste of time and money, right? Yes, they found out some criminal activity and people went to jail. A lot of that was because they were lying to the government during the investigation. But in the end, they didn't accomplish anything. They didn't prove that the president did anything wrong.
Do you believe the Russians affected the election, though? Do you think they interfered in the election?
Russians are Russians. Right, so if you're asking me if the Russians interfered, hell yeah, they interfered. Okay. Russians interfere in everything we do, but that goes back to the earlier point. That, one of the reasons we can't take our foot off the pedal on the national security investments is, Russia used to be what the government called a near-peer threat. Right, this president and the new national defense strategy now calls Russia and China peer threats, and that's a true statement from a cybersecurity, which ends up touching the elections. From a military perspective, from a manpower perspective, we're not the number one superpower in the world. We're one of three, right? So we have to invest, and we've got to ensure. So anyone who's surprised that Russia was meddling or Russia was involved in some sort of espionage, it's like, where have you been the last 60 years, right? So that shouldn't surprise anyone. This Mueller thing, to me, I really want to see the investigation behind the investigation. I think where this thing started and what lit the fuse, what was that spark that lit the fuse? There's a lot of questions around that. But again, I go back to, if they're so emphatic that he did something wrong, then why are they not doing it?
Well, I agree with you on that. We agree on that. So
okay, good.
Okay,
wrap it up.
Lightning round. All right. Marvel or DC?
Which one is Aquaman?
DC.
Than Marvel. Just watch that on the plane. Just wasted an hour and a half on the plane watching that.
Favorite movie?
Tombstone. Obviously Top Gun. I love Top Gun. But Tombstone's probably my favorite movie.
Favorite band?
Let's see. God. I don't know that I have a favorite band.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the first concert you attended?
Madonna.
Really?
Yeah,
okay.
I see Madonna.
Food you can't stand?
Let's see, there's not much that I don't like. I am not a big fan of these substitute ingredients that they're putting in a lot of these things, right? I don't like grass-fed steak, but I love steak.
Okay, any tattoos?
No tattoos.
Okay, evil laugh. Give me an evil laugh.
Come on, man.
Come on, give me a. Katie did it. Come on, give me a. I'm coming for you, Katie.
No, that's a serious laugh there. Let's see, evil laugh, right?
Good, very good. Got a joke for us?
Let's see, a 2020 Democrat-led Congress. See, you laugh. No, serious. Let's see, my 12-year-old's using this one. What did the bedspread say to the bed?
I don't know what.
Don't worry about it. I got you covered.
There you go.
That's his favorite joke. So.
All right, Mike, I do appreciate you coming in.
My pleasure.
This has been a lot of fun. We're going to do some more stuff with the Republican candidates. I'd love to have you come back again. Not talk as long, but maybe.
Yeah, no, I apologize. That was all.
No,
me.
it's great. It's you're very informative and you know your stuff. And hopefully we'll see you maybe in a debate or something in the future with the Talk of Santa Clarita.
Yeah, I'd like that. You know, Katie Hill on her podcast mentioned as long as it's not some crazy guy who's in dead last with no money, and she'd debate him on your show.
Well, you're not in dead last, and you don't and you have money.
I don't think I'm crazy. I think I'm pretty rational. So hopefully we can make that happen.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate you coming on the show, and we hope you guys enjoyed the talk.
You've been listening to the Talk of Santa Clarita. Listen to us on iTunes, SoundCloud.com, YouTube, and Stitcher. Barring a life event getting in the way, a new podcast is available every Tuesday. Questions, comments, and show ideas can be sent to thetalkofsantaclarita@gmail.com. You can also call or text us at 661-505-8672. That's 661-505-8672. Follow us on Twitter at The Talk of SC or on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at The Talk of Santa Clarita. You can also visit our website by going to www.thetalkofsantaclarita.com. This has been a production of Radio Free Santa Clarita Incorporated, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. To donate, go to radiofreesantaclarita.org/donate. Radio Free Santa Clarita, on the net and on the air, and we're very much aware.
Any questions?